introduce our speaker this evening, and it's our President, Deborah Chinnery, and she's going to be talking about the Ugly Men's Voluntary Workers Association, which I know nothing about. I saw June Greenslade this evening. June Greenslade, the wife of our founder, and I said to her that our President is going to be talking about the Ugly Men's Association. She didn't have a clue. And so I thought, oh well, because she would have been well around certainly before the war, before the Second World War. So anyhow, but very astute. Anyhow, thank you, Deborah.
That's good. Go around the applause before. All right. So yeah, the Ugly Men's Voluntary Workers Association. They were in existence from 1917 to 1948, so quite a significant length of time. And you would think then that we'd know something about them, particularly with a name like the Ugly Men's Association. But they seem to have faded into oblivion, so we'll bring them back to life tonight, hopefully. All right, so the beginning of the Uglies, as they were fondly referred to, was a lady called Mrs. Alicia Pell, née Buscombe, who actually immigrated from England, and she was from quite a well-to-do English family. And they settled in Kalgoorlie, which was a bit of a culture shock for her. And around about 1917, she was quite an astute fundraiser for the Red Cross. And she used to run beautiful baby and popular ladies competitions and raise quite a bit of money this way. Legend has it that a man came up to her whilst donating and said, what about something that the men can participate in? So she went home and thought about it and thought, a bit of a tongue-in-cheek stab at, at what he'd come up with, and decided to call it the Ugly Men competition. So the way that it ran was very simple, in that anybody could nominate anyone, had to pay a fee to nominate the person, and then people could pay a penny and cast a vote to someone. Now, whoever got the most votes won the competition, and all the money went to charity. But it caused, obviously, a lot of humour and fun in the community. It was so successful that word got around Western Australia, and this became a way of raising funds throughout Western Australia. So it became a major fundraising method. If I can point her out, she's looking so comfortable in her frock. I think that's her. So that's Alicia, and that's her sister Amy. They're with a cameleer sitting on a camel in Boulder. That photo was taken. Now the Perth competition. Oh, actually, sorry, forgot to read something. This is an excerpt from a letter that I got at the State Library. I found, and it reads: "It was 1917, during World War I, to raise funds for patriotic purposes, that Perth conducted an Ugly Man competition. Most of the city's leading citizens were nominated, and the list of contenders for the title of Perth's Ugliest Man was a long one, members of the public having been invited to cast penny votes for their particular fancy. For a fee of 5 shillings, anyone could nominate anyone, and this gave the candidate his first 60 votes. In some offices, the boys chipped in, and after swearing the official who took the nomination to secrecy, nominated their boss. It was in this way that my father became one of the original Ugly Men." So this was the Perth competition. It was organised at the East Perth Football Club, and it was in January of 1917. The monies raised went to the Perth Children's Hospital and the War Patriotic Fund. There was 132 nominations, including Alec Clydesdale, who was a very well-known businessman who ran Clydesdale Racing Course. It was over in South Perth somewhere. Father Crowley, Reverend Wheatley, and Police Sergeant Egan. So you can see absolutely anybody was up for nomination. Now this chap here, poor old Paddy Connolly, apparently was kind of neck and neck with another chap in the lead. So everybody was voting, and apparently people had a big board up in the city and people coming down and seeing who was in the lead. And it was a great source of humour in Perth. And he desperately did not want to win. So they had auction items, and he and another chap were trying to outbid each other for a £200 cheque. he ended up paying £320 for a £200 cheque because each auction item came with a certain amount of votes. So he wanted to be able to get those votes and add them onto his competitors' tallies so that he didn't win. But what happened was, once he got the cheque, they decided, no, we're going to distribute the 48,000 points equally. And so he became the winner. So he was the inaugural ugly man of Perth. Apparently he was a bit of a cad, a bit of a ladies' man. So I do wonder whether he broke a few too many hearts, and that's where the votes came from. But he was quite a successful businessman in his own right. He was the builder and original owner of the Kalamunda Hotel. So the East Perth Football Club wanted to raise £1,000, and they actually raised £2,000. It was so successful and so much fun. So the president of the East Perth Football Club, Mr. Harry Mann, said, "We can't stop here. It's brought the community together. It's been great fun. We need to do something with this and keep the ball rolling." So what they decided to do was create the Ugly Men's Association. So Harry Mann was the president of the East Perth Football Club. He was also the Chief Inspector of the Criminal Investigations Bureau. Hannah Connolly was elected patron. Alec Clydesdale, the local businessman, became a committee member. The inaugural meeting was held in August 1917, and they say it's in Mount Worley, but I wasn't able to find an address or building name or anything like that, so I wonder if it was actually East Perth and that the boundaries were perhaps not defined as they are now. It was 10 shillings annually, or 1 day's labour. Life membership was £5.50 shilling for extensive volunteer labouring. And they did that because they wanted to make sure that anyone and everyone could join. You didn't have to have money to be a part of it. So that was very important. Most of the executive on the committee were well-known identities. So they were businessmen and that's councillors, things like that. Most of the members were mainly sort of working men, working class people. So Harry Mann was the Ugly's inaugural president, and he was the vice president then for 21 years. He was born in Victoria and came over to WA in the gold rush in the 1890s. He was actually a mounted trooper in the country, and he was so well known for his investigative skills that he was soon promoted to CID. He was so good at detective work and at catching the crims that some of his cases actually gained international recognition. He was then promoted even further to become Inspector of the CIB in 1917. And to everybody's shock, he decided to step down from police duties and he went to live in the country. His brother was a returned soldier, so he decided to go and spend time with his brother, and they opened up a salt business, which apparently was hugely successful as well. So he was obviously a very intelligent man who was multi-skilled, lots of different things that he could do. But in 1921, the call of community service beckoned him back and he became an MLA for Perth, and he was a member of the National Party. Alec Clydesdale was also born in Victoria, and he came over to WA in the gold rush as well in the 1890s. He was the president then of the Uglies for 21 years. He was also the mayor of South Perth for 10 years, and prior to that, he was actually the mayor of Mount Magnet. He also decided to get into politics in 1921, and he ran for the seat of Canning, and he was a member of the Labor Party. He also was awarded an MBE for services rendered during the war by the King. And even though these two men had different political ideologies, they got on very well, and they were actually, when I was reading through, they were actually on quite a lot of committees and boards together, so they seemed to sort of, have the same sort of ethos. So the Uglies' ethos was that the Uglies are determined to help humanity, to raise the fallen, to smooth the path of the sufferer, and in the names of all who suffer undeservedly, calls upon Australia to support its efforts. At meetings, it was in their constitution, it was forbidden to talk about anything political or of a religious nature. It was all left at the door, and when you came in, it was all about helping the community and doing what you had to do for the ugly men. The Victorian method of charity, which was brought over obviously from Britain, was that the wealthy classes would donate to charities, and the charities would then decide who was worthy of receiving help. The Uglies did not want that at all. Everybody was equal, everybody was worth helping. They believed that with support and a good home and all those sorts of things, everybody could achieve, everybody could be the best that they could be. So previously it was the deserving poor. So if you were someone who was an alcoholic, for example, the old system was that you would receive nothing. whereas the Uglies said that's not the way we work, we help everybody. So anyone less fortunately situated than themselves. So that was really that's where they were coming from, that was their ethos. This is a member's badge. So this is just a standard member. It was a silver badge, and as you can see on the back of it, there was a membership number. This is a life member's badge, and theirs was a bit fancy. Theirs was dark blue, enamel on brass, and it had life member written on there, obviously. Okay, so the Uglies, their peak operating period was around about the mid to late 1920s. Annually, they raised and distributed around £12,000, which is quite significant. 5,000 to 7,000 applicants for help each year, over 2,000 members, and women were the first members due to the fact that men were at war. So they got in, clothing donations, cake stalls, flower arranging, whatever they could do to raise money. And clothing donations, they used to wash the clothes and darn them and then send them out to people who needed them. There was 21 suburban branches, and they were mainly located in areas where people were working class. So it was Bayswater, Victoria Park, those sorts of places. And over 80 country branches via cooperatives and roads boards that ran them. So they were huge, huge. So they obviously had limited funds. So they had to try, although there wasn't a criteria, there wasn't the deserving poor sort of aspect that previously existed, they did have to, because they only had limited funds, they did have to have a bit of a criteria. So what they used to do was send out people to find out whether cases were genuine or non-genuine. Some people had already received help from other places and tried to get extra help through the Uglies. And there was other people who didn't need any help at all but wanted to get something. And then there were people who were too proud to ask for any help and who desperately needed it. So they used to ask community members to not dob in your neighbour, but let us know if there's someone out there that really needs our help, because that's what we're here for. So they did used to try and find out if people were really desperately in need. Sometimes they couldn't give money. They were one of the only charities that used to give money. A lot of charities wouldn't give money. It was almost like a distrust of the poor. They'd only give assets, not money, whereas they gave money. One example was a woman whose husband was killed in the war, and she already had a home, so they were able to give her a sewing machine, and that gave her then the opportunity to create her own living and be able to support her children. Things like that, so it wasn't always money. The Uglies actually came together originally to help the widows and the families of soldiers from World War I, but in 1919, due to public pressure, the Commonwealth Government decided, okay, yep, right, well, they really are our responsibility, so we should probably help them out a bit. So soldiers used to get a plot of land when they came back from their services. And the Ugly men thought, okay, well, if they don't really need us now for homes and for that sort of thing, what can we do? So they changed their MO and decided that what we could do is they're getting these plots of land, let's train them to actually use that land so they then can look after their families and have a purpose. And obviously the land in Australia is very different to farming here than it is in Britain, so it was about teaching them about Australian land and how to actually farm the land. So that's sort of what they went into. And you can see there the Ugly Men's Instructional School for Returned Soldiers. I could go on and on about all the things they did, but really the list is absolutely endless. They would sit there and help people fill out forms. They would find people work, and then what would happen is, because the person had found a job, any sort of support they were getting from the government was stopped. So then they'd have a couple of weeks break where they had nothing until they got their first paycheck. So the Uglies would come in with food vouchers, money, bed, linen, anything they needed, they were there. So it was a very personal support system as well. And it just goes on and on. They helped orphanages, infant health centres. They bought and made an ambulance for Fremantle Hospital. They just did anything and everything. It's really incredible. They also started what's called the New Settlers League in 1920. So this became a subsidiary of the Ugly Men's Association, and they used to help migrants. So any migrant coming in, they would help them buy a house, build a house for them, teach them. So they used to go, once the soldiers had all gone through the school, they then turned that into an immigrant school where they could go in and learn how to, use the land. So they were very adept at finding what was really needed on the ground, and they got in there quickly and helped out as much as they could. Most of the migrants were English, But they did help Italian migrants and Chinese migrants as well, so it wasn't limited just to English migrants. Although there's a funny story where they looked at the Italian migrants and said, well, what can you do? You know, because they were so used to the British school system and the physicality of British men, but what can you guys do, you know? But they ended up sending them to farms and that sort of thing, and the Chinese migrants ended up in the Chinese market gardens and that sort of stuff. So they tried to find culturally appropriate places as well where they would feel settled and feel welcome and that sort of stuff. So they really, really cared about people. One of the things they did was, as I said, build homes for returned soldiers or for their widows. This home here, they did it in Fremantle, Mosman Park, Victoria Park. There's homes everywhere, but this one is actually in Bayswater. And this house was built for Mrs. Margaret Chinnery. So she was the wife of my husband's grandfather's brother. So my husband's grandfather and Tom, whose wife this is, they were brothers. Unfortunately, Tom died the day before Armistice. He was killed in action. And Reuben, my husband's grandfather, came home, hence the fact my husband's here, and was born. So, but this is the home. It's actually on the corner of Coakley Street and Lawrence Street in Bayswater, if you want to go and have a look at it. So it's 100 years old this year, and it's beautiful. So that's it there on the right-hand side. So these men here, they're the chaps that built it, sitting on the front veranda once they'd completed it. Most Ugly Men's Association homes were made out of weatherboard, and they were a very simple design. They kept it as simple as they could, so they could get them up quickly, and the men that were building them got used to building that particular sort of design, if you know what I mean. So that was just, and they could pump them out quickly. This one's a little bit different. It's brick. So it was the first Ugly Men's Association home in Bayswater that was made out of brick. And apparently, I've read a quote where they said they were so proud to build this home for the nicest man in Bayswater. So it's very special. And we have actually put that on the list of reviews for the Municipal Heritage Inventory for them to see if it's actually going to be saved, hopefully. It's on a large block, so I figure they can develop around it and just leave that there. Anyway, Ugly's fundraising. Well, what didn't they do? They did everything. Carnivals, fates, they had dress-up days. The kids there are dressed up as the board members of the Uglies. That's down on the Esplanade, they held a carnival down there. Cake stalls, as I said, flower arranging, raffles. A lot of things tended to have a bit of a gambling aspect to them, and I think that's probably because of Alec Clydesdale, the fact that he was a racing horse owner. So I wonder if there was a sort of an influence there from him. But really, I mean, the list is endless, the things that they did. I read where they had mock courts, so you'd be in the city, you might be sort of looking in the window, picking your teeth out or something, and some mock policeman would come up, drag you into the mock court, you'd be fined for picking your teeth in public, or they'd come up with the most ridiculous charges, and then obviously you paid the fine, and that was a way of donating to their cause. But they made it such fun, they were so popular in the community, and they really added to the culture of Perth. You know, it was they really created a great sense of community for everyone. So their biggest fundraiser was actually a place called White City. Now this is Chicago White City, because I wondered, why is it called White City? And this is why. This was a huge world fair held in Chicago, celebrating the arrival of Christopher Columbus in America. So, as you can see, all the buildings are clad in white. So it was known as colloquially as White City. And it's very beautiful. And they decided that people went there to look at, you know, how the streets were mapped out, the style of architecture, you know, the building strategies, all that sort of stuff. And this is how they felt all cities in the world should look, that this was perfect, you know, this was sort of perfection of what it should look like. But it was a fair as well, so there was fairgrounds and things like that. And just as Luna Park spread around the world, White City spread around the world as well, and we ended up one in Perth. Let's have a look at Perth's White City. Yep, that's it there. So this is William Street. I'm terrible with directions, and I was trying to figure out, where is it? And my husband came and went, turn it around. Anyway, so this is William Street, which goes right down to the water, the Swan River, and this here used to be called Bazaar Terrace, but it's actually now Mount Snow Road. And as you go on further, it becomes the Esplanade over here. So you can see here, sorry, I'll get my pointer. You can see here, this is William Street, goes all the way to the river, and then this is Mount Snow Road here. So So what's there today is the Esplanade bus station and the Perth Convention and Exhibition Centre. But it used to be White City. So here is a toboggan. So people used to climb up the ladder and toboggan down. It was hugely popular. There was a huge dance floor, a boxing ring, and there was all the usual carnival attractions like the freak show and people getting thrown, dropped into water if you hit the bell and all that sort of stuff. So it's all those usual sort of carnival activities, hugely popular and used to raise a lot of money for the Ugly Men's Association. But it wasn't theirs, it was actually built by a chap who was a member of the Ugly Men's Association, and the government actually allocated that bit of land for community purposes and for fundraising. So Silver Chain used to run shows there as well, Red Cross, all that sort of stuff. So the Uglies was only one part of the fair. And it used to be called White City, but when it was the Uglies' turn, they put Ugly Land sign up the top. And there was also one in Fremantle as well, which was on Phillimore Street, near the Esplanade, I think, and that was called Ugly Land. Not White City, it was just Ugly Land. Hugely popular. So, the beginning of the end, sadly. So what happened was that women in certain church community groups felt that White City was a moral dilemma for young women because they were on the dance floor dancing with men that they'd only just met that night. There was also a bit of concern that some people weren't wearing hats and some people were. Apparently that was hat issues. There was hat issues at White City. Men in the community were worried about the gambling aspect. They felt that it was family orientated. There was families there all the time. But they felt that children were being led astray by their parents participating in gambling type activities, and that was corrupting the youth. So that was a big concern. Alcohol, there wasn't actually any alcohol served at White City at all. However, there was the Esplanade, the old Esplanade pub across the road. And so when that finished up for the night, people might have staggered across and come into White City. And so, there may have been some drunken, outish behaviour, but it wasn't White City that was selling the alcohol. Now, A.O. Neville, you probably all know who he is. Yep. He did not want Indigenous people in White City at all. So he wanted them out, absolutely. And I'll read a quote from him about White City. Decent girls, and this is his words, decent girls do not visit White City. There are a certain number of them who go there mainly for the purpose of inviting some white man to accompany them somewhere else. It is my desire that neither half-castes nor Aboriginals be permitted to frequent the White City on any pretext whatsoever. It is simply debasing the natives, and the contests lower the status of whites in their eyes. He didn't like Indigenous men beating non-Indigenous men in the boxing ring. Didn't like that at all. And when there was the blockade in the city, I can't remember when that was brought in, 1929 I think maybe? No, a bit earlier than that, when Indigenous people were not allowed in the city unless they were there for a certain for actual business, and then had to leave. And that he thought that was great because then he finally got what he wanted and he got them out of White City. Methods of how they raised funds were questioned by the community. However, most people in the community really revered the Ugly Men because of the wonderful work that they did. Premier Collier, who was the Premier at the time, ignored a lot of these complaints for as long as he could until they got louder and louder and louder and it became a political issue, and he then had to close White City and Ugly Land in 1929. So revenue then for the Uglies fell to 1/4 of what they were previously getting. So they really started relying mainly on clothing donations, and they had to survive really on grants or any sort of donations that some business people might give them. So their ability to help others really became very, very limited, unfortunately. State Lotteries Commission, now Lottery West, actually commenced in 1932. And this was due to the Great Depression, to raise funds for hospitals and community organisations. And it was at a time when the Great Depression was very, very bad. And there was a lot of poverty-stricken people, and there was 35,000 people unemployed, and it was a terrible time. And they took over many of the activities of the Ugly Men's Association. Alec Clydesdale and Harry Mann, I think, saw the writing on the wall and realised that the time for the Ugly Men was coming to an end, and that the government had finally got what they always wanted to, which was control of the money that people were donating to the Ugly Men. So they are now donating to Lottery West, State Lotteries Commission. And that there is a photograph of the officials doing their first numbers draw. Okay? And so Alec Clydesdale and Harry Mann were invited to be on the committee, and they took that up because they felt that at least that way they could lend their expertise on how to raise funds, and they could also be part of what they wanted to, what they'd started all those years ago. So at the end of the Uglies, there was always, from business people, always calls for financial transparency. So even if they weren't members, they wanted to know what the Uglies were doing with all that money. Even though it was $12,000, which was a lot of money, but the amount of people that needed their help, it was all gone. But they wanted to know what was happening with that money, and they always wanted to find out what was going on. Alex Clydesdale actually passed away in January of 1947, and that gave them a chance to then step in and try and take over and see what was happening with the money. Harry Mann called a meeting of life members because they were trying to say, we don't have any members anymore anyway. He said, hang on a minute, call all the life members. We're life members. So got them in, and they tried to go through all the financial documents and things like that and try and figure out what assets they still had and if they could continue on and keep helping the community. Sadly, what he found out was that Alec Clydesdale had accidentally burnt quite a lot of their information in the early 1940s. What happened when they gave people homes, some people rented them, they didn't purchase them, or they set up an arrangement where they would actually pay off the house. And the Uglies never expected it, but they didn't mind that because then it gave them a source of income to keep doing good work. But what happened was that after all the debts and things like that were paid off, they had to sell some of the homes and things, and they ended up with £1,000 in their bank, and that's all they had. So Harry Mann was devastated and became a bit bitter about it all. He was very saddened by it all. Under the Charitable Collections Act, the government then declared that the Ugly Men's Association had fallen under maladministration, and they closed them on the 18th of August 1948. And for me, the Uglies' legacy is that Harry Mann and Alex Clydesdale gave the working class self-respect. They gave them their dignity back, they gave them self-determination, and they let them know that no matter what status they were born into, they could rise above that and be who they wanted to be and achieve what they wanted to achieve. The lack of red tape allowed them to be so flexible and to respond to the needs of people very, very quickly. And it's strange that they were both in politics, so they had ability to influence there, but they didn't. They wanted this separate entity that they could really respond quickly to, and what they felt they were doing the best for the community that way. They really filled the spaces left open by government. So, for example, if you were in an insane asylum or something, you would get funding that way, but if you were blind or deaf, you got nothing. The Uglies stepped in and helped those people get work and educations and all those sorts of things. And in the words of Rabbi Freeman, which I think this is lovely, I particularly like their religion, which, as I heard one of their leaders express it, consists in doing all the good they can to all their fellow creatures found to be in need. And I think that's a wonderful thing to say. This is the resources that I used. If you want more information, because this is really just an overview, if you want a more detailed idea of what went on, Rita Farrell actually did a PhD on the Ugly Men's Association. So if you type in Rita Farrell Ugly Men's, it'll come up with a link to Murdoch Research Repository. You can have a good read of it there. And so in conclusion, I'd just like to say, bless the ugly men. I think they're just incredible. And it's amazing that people don't know that much about them when they did so much good for such a long time. And they're fantastic. Anyway. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Is it primarily a working class organisation, or does it reflect all different sectors of society?
The executive members were usually prominent people in the society, so they were councillors, businessmen, that sort of thing. But the actual membership base was working class. Yeah.
Do you think the spirit of the Ugly Men's work lives on in other organisations today, sort of like succession of
Yeah, I don't know. I hope that it does. But I don't know.
telephone and things like that.
Yeah, perhaps, it might do. But they certainly, with the fact that they had to choose genuine and non-genuine cases, if people weren't chosen because they weren't actually they weren't actually eligible for anything, some people got really nasty and threw rocks through their windows of their homes. Their children were bullied at school and things like that. So, they went through all that and still wanted to help everybody. So, but yeah, I'd like to think that charity, not charity, but that's carried on. Yeah. Sorry?
I have, some of the places I've been to with my practice club include places like the food bank.
Oh, yes.
And I was greatly taken with the aspect that they covered.
Yes.
Anyone within the parameters of need got served. There was no publicity for anybody else. It wasn't a mass media company taking the glory or anything like that. It was just a straight out thing with a little bit of help from the government, which they should, but really filling in a big need. And there are a couple of others like that.
Yes.
They're the ones I think
carrying that on. But they do struggle terribly, though, the food bank, to actually reach as many people as they need to and to survive. And it's probably because a lot of people don't know about them. I did some help. I went in and did some volunteer work there when I was at uni, and they'd just bring in all this food, leftover food, and they'd have these people there going, right, what should we make today? Potatoes, carrots, they just throw everything in, and they was like, oranges, we can put orange in a soup, no problem with that, oranges, everything was going. It was an interesting tasting soup. But they just had to do what they could, and people would turn up out of nowhere for their cup of soup, and they help a lot of people. So yeah, you're right. But they need more help, that's the thing. People don't know about them and they need that assistance.
There's a list of all the places over at Shopfront. On the back of the Shopfront brochure they've got just a list of all the help, get help.
Do they? Yeah.
Places.
Okay.
There's places where you can get a shower and a cup of tea. Or there's all sorts of things.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, so that's good. It sounds like there's lots of places to help, but I think...
I have to thank Deborah for bringing that. I'd heard that term, you talking about it, in the office up there, ugly men, but it didn't hook me onto anything at all, and I was a blank, and what a feeling that has been to educate me about that. As I said, I talked to June Greenslade and mentioned that to her, and it didn't even click with her, so I suspect, in fact, that the end of their time, 1948 and so forth, there was nothing there to advertise it, to make it hugely known, and it would have just faded away. Who would be advertising? Who would be telling all the people that never experienced it about it? Thank you. Thank you.